Thanks again for everybody for joining us. We'll kind of restart. Again, we're going to be diving into FPS design these next few weeks. For those of you that are kind of new here or not sure what we're doing, we're kind of working on the concept right now for what is this game, right? And I'm doing this for several reasons. One, I think a lot of people, thanks Alexios, a lot of people think that an FPS is really easy to design. They think that it's just, it's a shooter. There's been a million of them on the market. You've got a first-person camera. You've got a gun. You run around. You pull a trigger. You shoot people. They die. I literally have seen that detailed of design documents from students. And literally, the entire design document was about a paragraph. And that's all they thought they needed to put in there. And so part of this exercise is to really show you guys, that even something as I would call simple, and I don't think that FPSs are simple. They're very nuanced. But the perception is that they could be very simple in comparison to, say, an RPG or lots of other games. They are simpler. I know Kinsu. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. So part of what we're going to try to do is to show you both the depth and complexity of even something that is perceived as simple as an FPS, what that challenge is, right? And what is it like to really design an FPS, and just how much information that as a game designer we have to know. You got to remember that when we design an FPS or any game, that every little detail somebody somewhere probably decided. Now, occasionally maybe something randomly got in there. But generally, a game designer made a decision about every single little teeny tiny thing. How fast you move, where you move. Every little thing that we're going to see in this list is something that's going to be covered. It's really, you have to be really detail oriented, right? You got to really get in there. So even something again perceived like an FPS that's simpler to design, it's still really complicated. And so I'm kind of using this example, this FPS design, both for if you're taking the course and you're in the second term of the Diploma program, which is the third term of the course, you'll be designing an FPS. And so this video series is kind of for some of my students to learn how and have an example of how to take something from the very start all the way to the very finish. And we're going to go from concept all the way to level design, white boxing, and hopefully even implement it in Unreal. And so, there's lots of nuances, right, to how game design, is, but I want you guys to kind of see this is not as simple as you think, and again, they only get even more, complicated as games, go forward. So Rosonian, Ryan is asking about what would be an example of a casual FPS. You probably know better than I do, but I'm trying to think of what I would consider a casual FPS. That's a tough one, because you could go back to some of the more simple FPSs, like a Doom or something like that were in the early days, and those were easier, but I wouldn't call them casual, right? And I'm sure there's been examples of people that have tried to make FPSs more casual, where they've simplified the mechanics. I mean, I know there is some. Would you say point and click games can be? Yeah, I mean, I've seen people try to do even turn-based, FPSs, exactly, point and click, games that, some of the, especially the VR games and things like that, have tried to do things where the movement systems, you're on rails and you're point and clicking things in a little bit more, systemic way, right? Or a little bit more of a, thing where it's not necessarily free-form motion. And so even the combat, I've seen games that have done turn-based combat, in an FPS, right? But do you consider that casual, or do you consider that more hardcore? It's hard to say, right? I mean, so I think the word casual in an FPS, they're a bit of an oxymoron, at least at some levels. That doesn't mean you can't do a casual, but I think the word casual itself is almost a misnomer, right? Where you have to think about, what do you mean by casual? Does it mean it's easier to play? Does it mean it's more mass market and easier to get into? And what, yeah, so, FP, yeah, so, I mean, lots of games can be first person, right? And then, whether you want to do it as a shooter or not, it's up to you, right? So there's lots of stuff. There's lots of examples of the first person perspective, first person view type games that are going to get into more simple RPGs or more simple adventure games even. I mean, I'd go so far as to say a game like Firewatch, for example, is a good example of what I'd call a casual first-person game, right? There was no combat in there. I mean, in today's conversation, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole. I mean, we're talking about first-person shooters today, right? So a game like Firewatch isn't exactly, in that vein, but I would argue that that's probably a good example of what I'd consider a casual first-person perspective kind of game. But there's been lots and lots of immersive simulations to other things that that can be first person again they can be all just story driven. They can be other kinds of games that have, like I said, no combat or dialogue systems or very casual combat or even turn-based combat or whatever. So there's really no limit to how you want to mix genres, right? But for today, this is about first-person shooters. So we're trying to stay kind of in that vein about what is this, game. And so, for those of you that are just joining us, if you hadn't seen, fortunately I made a couple of mistakes in the beginning. There is a link at the top to the document. I think it's the third link that I put in there, second or third link. So the bottom link is working. So for those of you that want a copy of this document, you're welcome to keep and check back, because this may be a good reference for you, whether you're designing your own FPS or whether you're part of the program. At CG Spectrum, it's up to you. But but I wanted you guys to have access to this to this document and be able to see as an example, use as an example, and be able to learn from it, and a lot of these can be a good template, right? And a good list of kind of systems and things like that. So since we have some new people here today, let's kind of dive in a little bit. I'm trying really hard, in this series to keep it a little bit more practical, a little bit more hands-on, trying to sort of dive in and design stuff a little bit faster and quicker than I normally would. Again, these would be a series of, if I was in a normal design process, this process of just even doing the concept for this game could take weeks or months, and so if we're doing it 2 hours a week, even in a month, that's only like not even a day of a designer's time, in a typical thing. And so we're getting a kind of just a fractional taste of what a real world design, the complexity of it and the depth of it is. And so just keep that in mind, that even though I'm showing a process here, the best I can, that this process definitely is not perfect, because I'm going fast through it, right? But I'm trying to skip a lot of the theory best I can and really trying to get into, designing this. And again, be aware, this is I think the third or fourth video on this series. It's weird because I put third, but I think this was actually the fourth. Anyways, there's been 3 or 4 videos. I'll double check the naming afterwards to make sure that they're named correctly. But there has been a few others, already in this series. So if you're coming in and haven't seen those before, definitely check those out. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well, and all that fun stuff, and keep following us. Here at CG Spectrum. And if you don't know, we've got, almost every day. I think Saturday is the only day we don't have a live stream. So we do have a lot of live streams, every week. I think there's at least 7 different live streams a week. So about 14 hours of streaming, that we're doing to help you guys. So hopefully you enjoy that. But definitely check out, the other art streams and Unreal streams and things like that as well. All right, so really quick, we're just going to go through kind of what has been here and what's there, and so just to kind of show you guys like what have we gotten to so far. And I haven't purposely answered a lot of these questions. I think Ryan, you're asking about the hardcore, casual, or what, So for now, I agree that casual is kind of a misnomer there, but what I'm actually going to say is, is that what I'm designing is more mid-core to hardcore, right? So something that would be competitive to, any of the top shooters really on the market, but also trying to find that niche of what we're trying to do. And I have not chosen, the theme or any of that kind of stuff right now. What I'm kind of looking for is like, what would be a cool hook and something that differentiates this purely on gameplay. And then if I can find that, then, I can come up with maybe a unique theme or something to go with it. But we'll get back to that maybe in this talk or the next one, about it. But these are just, again, this is a brainstorming doc. And so as I get in here, as I just think of things, I put them in here, right? And it's the way that I work. And this process doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But you'll see that I'm very non sequitur in how I work because ideas and stuff are all very related to each other, right? And so you'll often bounce around from idea to idea to idea, and sometimes you're working on one idea and your brain goes like, oh, I got another idea, and then you'll flip over, down to another section, you'll work on that, and then you'll flip back, and you're constantly kind of bouncing around as your brain comes up with new ideas, but you'll see that that's a good process, and you'll see that allows you to to realize that everything's, or not everything, but a lot of things are very related, right? A lot of game systems, for better or for worse, need to be related, right? So, for example, movement and shooting in an FPS. You can't just design shooting completely by itself because you have to understand, like, well, where does shooting, how do I move? Like, can I move really fast? Do I move really slow? Do I have cover? Do I have stealth? Do I have all these things? So, like, movement system itself can be this big, huge, massive thing. And then I have to understand, well, how do my weapons work well there? Do I want to go really, and the question may be different for every weapon, right? And every move, and you have to understand, like, okay, I can jump, but maybe in this particular game we have melee combat with swords, on top of our guns. And so, then the running, the jumping, and then can I do like air attacks and, jump up with my sword and come down, on the person that way, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things you have to kind of think about when you're designing these games that see that all these systems really work together a lot, right? So let's just really quickly kind of go through again for those of you that are just joining, the link to this document is in the top of the chat channel today. So feel free to jump in and check it out if you want. So we went through just a lot of the common FPS features, and again, you'll see that like I didn't talk about things like camera and controls and stuff like that. Like, yes, at some point you need to come back there and you need to do that, and that is a big thing to design, and it's very, very critical to this kind of game. But it's not, it's not what I need to design right now. And so a lot of times as a designer, it's really about like, when do I design something? Not necessarily what it is. And camera and controls to me are a little bit more known. Doesn't mean that my FPS is going to be, exactly a straightforward FPS. Maybe it ends up having third person over the shoulder or other kinds of camera views and, things like that. But for the most part, that is not a huge risk to me, so I am skipping that for now, to save time. We know that, the game interfaces also like is something that's critical or, important to an FPS, but I don't need to worry about that now, right? We are not currently, at least with my current plan, I'm not planning on doing a multiplayer version of this. Although with FPSs, there is, a strong multiplayer component, to that. So we don't want to necessarily lose the multiplayer component there either, right? So those are the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about, but you don't necessarily have to be worried about yet. But multiplayer will be something that definitely can. I think last week I talked about Ratchet Deadlock and all the changes we had to make in that to go from a single player to a multiplayer game. So there was some stuff there that's important to know. The player characters, NPCs, again, something we're going to come back to once we know a little bit more. But I'm kind of writing things down as I go, as I'm thinking about stuff, right? And again, like player movement, we've got some basic stuff, some basic notes in here, and talking about different types of movement systems, talking about items, weapons, melee, are we going to do it or not? I would say this is, it could be TBD, or it could be just a simple butt stroke, with your gun or a punch or something, or a knife, as a default melee attack. But, again, could be, oops. I lost my train of thought there. Could be optional there, whether we do weapons or not. That's something we're going to worry about later. In the non-combat items, there's lots of things you're going to need to be able to do, and use for combat. Skills and abilities we haven't got into yet. Senses we talked a little bit about last week. There was a really good example, kind of a deep example, where I went off the deep end about how the player sight and stealth mechanics and things like that, and how those are all going to be kind of interrelated to everything. And so I gave a big example last week about how using night vision goggles and AI and characters and all these things, how they're all interrelated, and trying to show how it's really hard to design like one full set of systems really well, or in isolation, and then moving on to like the next thing, because they all kind of interrelate. And so a lot of times you want to take these high level passes on everything and just dive deeper and deeper and deeper. But if I just go, for example, and design the stealth system and try to design stealth in totality, without understanding the rest of the game, like the levels and, and the level design and, and how much cover I have and things like that. Again, last week I talked all about this. Then it gets, really tricky because you don't know, what it is. Alexios, no, Zonian is not in the course. He actually helped me develop the course. So he's a friend of mine. So he used to work for CG Spectrum. So, and then, stealth systems, health systems, vehicles, that's a whole other big thing that, can drastically change the game. Of course, multiplayer here, and we will talk about some of the foundations. We're going to, again, assume that it has multiplayer, but we're not going to right now design the multiplayer, and we will probably get into the multiplayer design after this whole thing finishes, because we do have another term that is a multiplayer game design. And I want you guys to kind of see, like, how do you take a first-person shooter that's single-player, that was kind of built for multiplayer, but now how do I actually make the multiplayer modes and multiplayer stuff out of it? So that'll probably be coming in, another few months. By the way, I'll probably mention, I guess it's in 2 weeks. I was thinking it was next week. I think it's in 2 weeks, the 27th. There's another, I will not be streaming that day for those of you that are here, and listening that week. There's some other event at CG Spectrum going on online at the same time, so they've asked me to not stream that week. So just for any of you that are my loyal fans, thinking in 2 weeks from today I will not be streaming. So and again, going into like IP brand considerations, and then getting into all the map level configurations, NPCs and AI. So you can see that there's been, a lot of things, a lot of areas all kind of working together. So what's next? Like, what do we deep dive into? So, Alexios, if you don't know, on Slack, there's a couple channels and groups for all the game designers, right? So if you have not found those yet, check those out. But there's or DM me and I can, make sure you have access to them if you don't. But you can get to all the game design students through that Slack channel, and that Slack channel will give you access to everybody that's currently taking the course. So you can post there and get feedback from everybody. So you don't necessarily even need to worry about who's on this channel and who's in the course or not. You can use that Slack channel to, I don't remember the name, I don't have Slack open at the moment. So just so you know, if you can't find it, let me know. And then there's a couple general game design ones that anybody at the school who's interested in game design is also in. So some of those channels, yeah. So feel free. I mean, again, you're welcome to message people, but I just like I just wanted to make sure you knew that there was additional resources there for you to use for getting a hold of people. All right. So let's dive in. Today I'm thinking about talking about the health system. So let's dive into health and kind of show you how complicated health systems kind of get. Because again, this is a system that again is underrated on like how complex it can get, and the craziness of why the nuances within a health system really can make or break your game, and the complexities that are there. So, and just kind of all the nuances that go along with a health system. And again, guys, this is a conversation today, so feel free to chime in if you've got ideas. If I missed something, or whatever, please send me a message, and we'll incorporate your ideas, into the document as well. So, this is, I like to try to be interactive with my streams as much as I can, and I appreciate it when you guys help me. It's pretty hard to be up here for 2 hours blabbing with no preparation. So, any conversation or whatever does help me a lot. I do appreciate it. So, thanks in advance. But like I said, feel free to chime in or ask questions if you're not sure, what I'm doing. So let's talk about designing a health system right now, and and how and why are these complicated. So health systems are, again, very, very nuanced. It seems like it's really easy, and then it can be very challenging, to say the least. And like I said, there's a lot of things that go along with the health system, but it can make the game really approachable and really easy to play. It can also make the game really, really hard to play. And if you, for example, if you look at the early Rainbow Six games, I've talked about this a little bit, they were kind of one shot, one kill. A lot of weapons could kill you in one shot. And most of the others took 2 shots, and so you played the game totally differently, and you had almost no healing. They kept it more simulation and more realistic. And so one of the things I had to do in Rainbow Six Vegas was to change that game up quite a bit and try to make it a lot different, and a lot more, I'll use the word casual, although, that's not the right word here, but, there's a reason why that, that Rainbow Six Vegas was more successful than the previous games was the health system. And that was a big part for why it was there, because it allowed you to heal and allowed you to kind of heal over time as well. So Alexios, to answer your question, what's your take on the Call of Duty health system with no visible HP? Just the screen turning red as you get damage. Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's no right or wrong answers here as a game designer. This is about, do you want to immerse the player? I mean, so I think there's several reasons to do this system. One, it's a little bit more casual, I'll call it, again, a little bit easier in that, if I don't have a health bar that's degrading and things like that, it's just kind of like, I go take some damage, I go away, from a little bit, and then I sort of heal. So that immersion and immersiveness in the game is important at some levels. But I personally I prefer myself, games that have a little bit more data, a little bit more information, and a little bit more stuff where you can really see, like how close to death am I, and the player can then make strategic choices based on that. But if you try to design a health system that has no health bar at all, or no visible things, then, that can be really tricky. Now, there's a lot of tricks, and we'll get into this on the UI UX side of things, where, for example, if the player has full health or full ammo or full anything or whatever, if it's not something they need to pay attention to, you can hide that UI element while it's at max or while it's there, right? And so that part of that UI can go away to kind of make it a little bit more immersive. But, if you get down to like 90%, it can be very subtle, but then the closer to death you get, in my opinion, you need to have more visual information, even having it blink and turn red, whatever, that calls your attention to it so that you really, know that you're there. And I think the hardcore players may be, tracking and knowing, a little bit more of like how to play. But I think, again, the newer players are going to struggle with the lack of information, is my opinion. And so that's why I like a visible HP bar, even if it's not on all the time. Just because I want to know that information, right? I'm going to play more aggressively myself if I know how much HP I have. And if I don't have enough, if I don't have enough information, then, you know, I might be close to death and going really aggressive, you know, and then die. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was so close to death, right? So information is really important to know things. Like even when we get into ammo and weapon systems, right? Like how many rounds are left in my magazine? You know, like if I'm capped, you know, and I'm full up, then, you know, I might go in again much more aggressive. If I know that like I'm resting and I'm hiding and I got one shot left, I'm probably going to reload, right? But if you want to try to create something much more immersive, and you get away from even say, you know, how much ammo you have left and which weapon you have selected and all these kinds of things, then like how do I know what to do in the right time periods, right? How do I make decisions? And so that's where we'll get into later a little more of that UI UX side of tying these things together. But it's a great question because it really does relate a lot to what we're trying to do here and stuff. So So it says, well, the thing is, of course, there are actual HP numbers, but the player can't see them. It helps in the immersion. It also keeps the UI simple. Yeah, and another solution as a game designer is just give both options, right? If a hardcore player or whatever wants to be immersive, then just have a UI option that says immersive or whatever and let them turn that on and off, right? So I'm a big fan of not limiting choices. And giving people some flexibility, some modularity, and understand that there's different types of players, right? And so sometimes as designers, we make choices for the players, but they're kind of arbitrary. It's like, well, I like it this way, right? So I'm going to do it this way. And you need to be able to step back out of that and go like, what does my player want to do, right? What are they wanting? Not what do I want, right? That you really have to be the advocate of the player. And so you need to understand, like, you know, why are people doing that? And sometimes, in all honesty, we don't know. And so in a lot of games, you know, in a lot of designs where we'll implement something like, for instance, taking off and maybe our initial goal is like, hey, we're going to make this thing really immersive. So we're going to get away, like if you look at Dead Space or games like that, they got away with, like they took away all the on-screen UI, but they replaced it with like some color things on the uniform or some stuff that was part integrated into the artwork of the character that told you some of the health status, told you some ammo, you know, things like that, right? And some of that can be really great. In a first-person game, you don't have a third-person character in front of you to do that trick on. So however you skin the proverbial cat, I mean, minimal UI is definitely great to have. But again, you know, some players like it, some don't. Don't take options away if it's something that they're used to. Yeah, so Alexios, it also helps when it comes to planning builds. For example, if I use weapon X with Y and Z upgrades, I need 6 rounds to kill someone. And Call of Duty games is all a bit vague, and you end up searching the wiki. Yeah, so I agree. There's a lot of that kind of stuff where you're not quite sure exactly how to play, or exactly, you know, the min-maxers, people that want to, you know, figure out the exact build that's going to be great or whatever, right? When they hide a lot of stuff from you and don't have it in their interface, then, you know, it can be, you know, a problem. And you can also do things, you know, where, again, whether it's in a pause screen menu that they can access in between matches, or whether it's in, you know, the front end or in the front end menu, you know, in between matches. There's lots of places you can put information, right? About, you know, how many feet per second, you know, how far the range is, all the damage types, all that kind of stuff. So let's not go down that rabbit hole because we'll get into next maybe designing some of the weapon systems. You'll kind of see how weapon systems and health systems, it's really hard to design them in a vacuum. They both are very interrelated, right? And so you'll see, you know, at some point we may jump around a little bit as we're designing these health systems because there's a lot of stuff that's there. And again, there's not right or wrong answers, guys. This is, you know, up to you to figure out, like, what do you want, right? What do you want as a game designer? What is the consumer going to want? What's going to sell, you know? And so, I'm right now making arbitrary choices because I'm designing my game, you know, and I'm trying to think about the consumer, but I'm also just, you know, kind of trying to show you in the limited time we have together about, like, how do I think about this stuff, right? So what I'm going to do is start by, before I had these all kind of here, so what I'm going to do is put these like this, and All right, I'm not going to... So, what I'm going to say is... So I'm going to say yes. Do we have a health bar and show the health information? Yes. Let's just we'll keep this again kind of simple. We don't need to go too far down the rabbit hole there. But how is that interesting for the player, right? And how does that keep it fun for the player? Yeah, I don't know. Dokinsu, ammo's your HP. I mean, it'd be tricky. You could probably get away with it. I would argue the way that you could link those two together, if you wanted to do something that was a little bit non-typical, just to riff on, to show you like how you can take an idea and go with it, right? So, and this is an important skill as a game designer, because quite often you'll be in meetings and you'll have people throw out like a kind of a crazy idea, and they're like, you're like, no, that would never work. And then you're like, oh, wait, I got an idea. Like, maybe it would work if we did X, right? And you need the skill set to brainstorm and to take people's ideas and accept their feedback. And occasionally you're like, no, you're totally like, no, wrong, bad. Like, that is not going to work, right? And so that does happen, and you have to make sure you're polite about it, but there is times when it's there. But imagine an energy system, right? Now, in this particular case, I would argue that we'd have to do something kind of sci-fi or fantasy. Something where I would take the word ammo and abstract that out to, what is the thing that makes my weapon function, right? And so the concept of ammo could be more abstracted, and that... the amount of energy or mana or whatever that we're using could be both, something that keeps us alive. Like if we had a health system where, we need to breathe air, right? And, and we need energy and power that powers our suit, our battle suit, right? So we literally are breathing on the batteries. So we have a battery pack on our back, we have a battery full of energy, and that battery literally keeps us alive. But in the same hand, that same battery is used by weapons or by other things in the game, and I'll say it could be even bigger than just weapons, right? I mean, even healing myself could take energy. Maybe that's an oxymoron there, because the idea of energy using energy to generate energy maybe isn't working, right? But maybe there has to be a different analogy in that case for a health system. We won't go there yet. But Nukinsu, I think it's not necessarily a bad idea. It could be something that's kind of interesting. I don't remember, Stefan. I don't remember. It's been a while since I played Diablo 3, so I don't remember how that system was working. Sorry, but yeah, I mean, I think there's been games that have done stuff like that where you can kind of, again, make decisions. And then one thing I like to do, not trying to get into damage systems right now necessarily, or into weapon systems, but again, these are really tightly linked, so we may keep popping into the weapon system design because it does relate to this. But if you had a weapon, each weapon could take different amounts of energy, in order to function, right? So a really big gun and really powerful gun, could take, say, 100 points of energy to function, versus another one, could only take a couple points or 10 points or something, right? And so then you have to also make choices like, oh, do I really want to use this like special weapon because it's gonna drain my energy even faster, which puts me closer to death. And then I've got to find a way to build it back up again. And so the question then is, and I'm going to dive into this for a second because I think it's important. We're going to get to this in just a minute. And so while we're talking about it, I think this is an important point. So, Stephen, just some builds of Necromancer, that high HP regen. Okay. Yeah, I do kind of vaguely remember that. Thank you. So if you think about how you heal, right? And so we'll jump here just for a second because we're talking about, but Not heal. Well, yeah. Let's see. I'm going to put in magic here just because this is, again, a more generalized thing. We haven't chosen what IP it is. So why this is kind of important to understand is this point of heal over time. This is a really, really, really nuanced problem that you have to have. So this kind of comes back to some of the Call of Duties and some of the other games, and even what we did in Rainbow Six, where you run into a run and gun situation. You run in, bang, 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 bang. You take your shots, and then you take a bunch of damage, right? Well, if my health goes down to, say, 5%, so I'm really low on health, if the only way I have to heal is to heal over time, what my natural tendency then is I'm going to go run away, and then I'm going to just sit and wait. And depending on how you balance that, that sitting and waiting can take a really long time. Or quick. I'm going to make that change there. So the problem there is that you want to keep players as engaged as possible in the combat scenarios. And this one of the nuances in FPS is how do I get you guys, how do I encourage you and reward you to come in here and fight together, and have it out. But in the same hand, how do I, if you get really damaged, this other guy's kind of winning, if you run away, now let's just say it takes a minute for you to fully heal. So you're going to go hide behind a tree. Now you're just sitting there for a minute. And you're like, okay, I'm healing. Oh, I'm bored. And you lose the whole momentum. You lose that whole thing in there. And so healing over time can be really good. But it also, if that's the only way to heal, and so in this case, Nokinsu, with your idea there, if we needed to do a lot of healing because we're, a lot of energy recharging, however that energy got recharged, that could be dangerous or hard because we may have to go away and spend some time recharging, and that's not fun, right? And so heal over time has to be very delicately used. Now, to be clear, any of these options, and if I'm missing something, let me know. I'm just trying to show you guys, again, quick ideas here. You can use any or all of these together. So these are not mutually exclusive, right? And I'm just adding things here as I'm thinking about them. So you need to be thinking about that as you're designing. And again, my brain's kind of going. We'll get back to this. Just as I was thinking about a few states here. I was trying to think of other types of actually, I'm going to put armor and shields on separate things. All right. So back to just the main health bar. So, we're just going to say there's a health bar, right? Now we can get into later how much health, we can ask questions of So, for example, can your max health of your character, so this is an important question that's kind of a bigger thing that we're not going to necessarily get into, and right now, I'm going to say no, and I'm keeping this simple for a reason. And that's, because it just gets too complicated. So, if you look at a lot of the games, that have tried to do persistence in their stuff and you know, it gets really tricky. That those games start to go into like being an MMO almost, you know, and you have persistence over time, and that really messes up multiplayer. And so you get into like you have different multiplayer builds and single player builds and all these kind of things. So for now, we're just going to assume that the player has a certain amount of health and he's going to have that same amount of health over time. So another thing I just thought of is so what this is let me explain this here. Sorry, guys. So the max health versus current max health. So you might have seen this in some games where you have your max, you have a health bar. Let's just right now say it goes 0 to 100, right? So certain damage might degrade what your current health is. So let's just say you have 100 points and you take damage from certain weapons or whatever. Your max health is 100 right now, meaning that's the most health you can possibly have. And then what you might have is certain weapons are just going to damage your current health. So your 100 goes down to 90, goes down to 80, 70, so on. But now if I heal, and even over time, it would go back up to 100. But then some weapons might damage your max total health, you know, so your actual max health might go down to 90, 80, 70, but then your current health might go down to 50, 40, 30, but if I heal completely like over time, it might only go back up to 70 again. So there's like I've lost my max health. There's a difference there of that. And that can be an interesting mechanic that so over time, you know, the amount of actual health you have degrades, and that can be a real tricky thing, but it can be a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed that in some games. So that's something else to think about. All right, Alexios, a few questions from you. In some games, HP is a resource. Great example is card games. You have the cards in your hand, which the mana or anything source to play them. And also your HP, which can either be used directly in some games, spend the HP to do something, or indirectly, skip a turn to play something. The next one, inexpensive HP. You are defenseless. Yeah, so, I mean, you might be able to use mechanics like that, you know, in an FPS. The question really is, like, again, what and how do I use that mechanic, right? What is that thing? So I could argue that you could have an energy system, for example, right? And an energy system might be something that the energy system may be something that is again a resource, like you're saying, you know, that could go into my HP, or it can be something that I could also use on a weapon or do something like that. So so there's a lot of ways that you could do that. And in fact, I'll put here. And I'll say power up here. So, you know, do you have health power-ups that really allow you to gain a bunch of extra health? So they're kind of like a health pack, but they actually take you beyond your max health, and allow you to have, say, 120 points of of health. But as soon as you go down to 100, you know, or whatever, then you can't ever go back up, you know, beyond 100 again. Or it could go away over time. Let's see, does it in? You know, how does that power up break or end? So Alexios, when a mechanic like dodging, which could provide iframes, or phasing, in which state you're invulnerable, be written down in this category, it affects health in a way. Dodging, yeah, I mean, I guess what we'd say here is that's a great thing here is just to say. So I think invulnerability. Well, thanks for joining us, Dokensu. Thanks for. Hopefully, we'll see you next week or another time. But glad you enjoyed it. And don't forget, these things are recorded on YouTube, so you can watch them anytime you want. Later today or after you wake up or whenever. So hopefully it helped you. So invulnerability, Alexios, that's a good thing, and I'll make this a little bit more generic here. I think your particular question would fall into this category, right? And I think in general, and this is a related question, which we also will put under respawning. But, some games also, when you respawn, you're invulnerable for a few seconds, so that people can't necessarily kill you, right then. But yes, absolutely, you can have any kind of power-ups or anything you want if it fits your IP, if it fits your game. I don't want to make a decision on this right now, about how that would work. But invulnerability is definitely something that games do have. Magic games and stuff definitely have like invulnerability spells and things like that. And so, there can be a lot of ways to do that, right? I'm not going to get into that yet because we don't know exactly what our IP is. And we don't know if being invulnerable as part of as a system and as a mechanic makes sense yet. Because if for sci-fi or fantasy, maybe. If it's modern day, probably not, right? So we'll come back to that, right? Yes, you could also say when you spawn and respawn, spawn, I'll even put in here, or perform, special moves. So, that would be another example of a system. But again, we don't need to solve every problem right now, right? This is not about trying to solve all those things. This is about getting kind of a framework that asks this question. So it's great to have the questions here. I don't need to go in and try to solve it all, because as we get more information about our IP and about the game, that we're building and stuff, then, we'll figure it out, right? So let's see here. All right, so we've got a bunch of different ways of things that are related to health, health power-ups, invulnerability, healing. So again, we have healing over time, in lots of ways. There could be others. Again, all this stuff. I'm not necessarily trying to do an exhaustive list, right? This is just to kind of show you guys hey, there's a lot here to think about. And so that, you need to kind of understand that. And some of these are related, so you can also take damage over time, right? And so, that question here, and we'll put an acronym in here for those of you who don't know it. Damage over time. For damage over time, do you have, do you need to do something special to end it? So in some cases, if you get poisoned, you might have to take a cure for the poison, so you stop being poisoned and you stop taking damage over time. So there's a bunch of things like that that can matter. And so just things to think about. But again, direct. So this would be, I'm just giving some examples. So direct damage just basically hits you, does damage, right? So something else here that we'll put in here is all right, so subtargeting health, area health damage. So So a few games have done this. I'm not going to go into the details here, but this is something else, like being able to sub-target, things like that, and being able to understand, can I do something there? And so, we'll get more into that of, like, can I be shot in the arm and can my arm take a bunch of damage and then my arm goes limp and now I can't use it. So any weapon that's in that arm, now can't be used or something along that lines, right? So that's one way to think about the sub-targeting, but so damage modifiers, I was going to put combos here. Actually, I'm going to put this under vulnerability. All right. So, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around here, but again, as my mind is thinking about stuff, right? This is kind of just the way it is. So there's lots of different types of damage. Damage over time. I didn't finish this one. Was area effect. So this would be like a grenade. So a grenade goes off, it damages everything in a radius. So now some of this is getting into the weapon system, so I'm not going to get into this super heavily, but again, this is where weapons and the types of weapons, things like that, will affect it. So we'll have this exact same thing, under the weapons, about all these different types of things. Let's see. Again, trying to keep us about the health system, but the reason these are important is, for example, damage over time continues to damage you, right? So you need a system that's going to allow you to keep, damaging somebody. Area of effect is going to affect, and damage people, but at a smaller radius. So you need to know, like, there's a modifier of damage from, like, how far away I am from the last effect and kind of where I am, things like that, right? So, like, you have to kind of understand, where is the person, how far away are they, those kinds of things. Same thing with the cone shotgun. It goes out wide, and if I'm wider away from it, things like that. We're not getting into accuracy and things like that. There is a factor here. But basically what this is, make a note is, actually, I'll put this down a little bit lower. So, in some cases, again, even if I'm wearing body armor, it goes through the body armor and hits my hits my body directly, right? And so some weapons can do that. And then streaming, things like flamethrower and laser, they're doing damage, but they're continuing to do it as long as you're in that stream, and stuff. So kind of like damage over time, but, it's hitting you, and it may, like, not, as they're moving like this, it might hit you a little bit and then crosses over you and things like that. So again, it has its own sets of things there. And then actually, I'm going to pull up here immunities. This is really under damage. Let's see. Now this doesn't immunities do not apply to every game genre and things like that, but these would be more found in fantasy sci-fi type games where, you might have an ice creature and he's basically immune to ice damage, and but he's more susceptible to fire damage. That kind of thing is a simple stuff. So lots of things there. So again, this is all about just like how is damage calculated, right? So again, this is related to weapons and it's related to the health system, right? But you can see how just even in a single game, and I'm not even doing an exhaustive list here, that every kind of weapon could have different types of attacks and different ways it does damage, and things like that. So you have to really understand these things, right? Also, I was going to say, and then we'll talk about damage modifiers. So, is there things that will also modify that damage? So this is kind of all under damage, but it's here of, a damage modifier would be something like, if I do a headshot, do I get 5x damage? If I do, if I shoot the guy in the back, do I do more damage? So some, does facing matter, right? Just stuff like that. Oh, there's even little things like, So, what else can I damage? There might also be things like friendly fire, is that allowed? And that has a huge part of the damage system, and, and you trying to understand that. So, anyway, so we're talking about damage modifiers now. So vulnerabilities, headshots, damage from behind, does facing matter? Some games have it where you have a lot of armor in the front, and you don't in the back. So imagine if we have a riot shield, right, and we're carrying the shield in front of us. If somebody shoots, and they're going to hit that that extra layer of armor, right? Then that could protect me, but it's only protecting my front. And if the person shoots me from behind, that shield no longer gives me an extra layer of protection. In fact, that gives me good question here. Let's see. So shields only protect from the front. So can shields be damaged and break? That's something we need to ask. And just it's again one of those things that because it is a pretty strong, powerful thing that that shields can do there. And you have to figure out the trade-off of some of these things. We haven't gotten into like the weapon systems, which are a factor here. But depending on how your weapon systems work, and you're one-handed, two-handed, and stuff. So like some games might allow you to have a big heavy shield, but only kind of a light gun. And so you can have the shield where you're really protected, but you can't do a lot of damage. Some games just let you have two hands, and you can put two guns in it. You can put a shield in another gun, or some combination thereof. Stuff like that. So we're not getting into that yet because that's part of the weapon systems. But you can get a sense for, how that's, affecting you. All right. And then weak points would be places, headshots is part of that, but I'll just put it as a separate line item for now. But weak points are, anywhere on a particular body that is more susceptible to taking damage. And how is that calculated, right? And so that's kind of part of that damage system. So, are they shown? So I would say that this is more common in, say, boss fights, but it could be, it could be used on any kind of weapon, or any kind of character or vehicle, anything like that. So weak points do not have to be bosses, but you'll more commonly see that in boss fights where suddenly like a piece of the boss like glows, and that like you hit that piece right now to even damage him at all, let alone so he could be invulnerable except for a weak point or something like that. So again, these are all these things like weak points. Again, it's part of the health system, but it's also going to be part of the character designs, the NPC designs, and things like that, right? So all these things we can't design in a vacuum, but it's good to put in here and then remember that, later when we design our characters, we need to decide if we want weak points or not. Then how do we design those in? And then I won't get into like, critical hits and combos and stuff too much, but there's lots of other ways of calculating damage, where you might have some stats or, both from your player character or from the weapons or some combination thereof, and those critical hits, are more likely with certain combinations of things. And therefore a crit, could be something that does double damage, triple damage, whatever. And then, combos and chains can also, have, extras amounts of damage. If you're doing more of a Devil May Cry kind of game or something like that, you get a combo for doing a certain number of, hits in a row, and you get a kill streak or other kinds of things. I'll even put under here, so, there's just all sorts of stuff. And again, I'm not going to try to get into the weeds too much on this. So, armor. Real quick, so I forgot to write this down. All right, so shields, again, they're from the front, now, like Halo and stuff like that, sorry, I can't spell today. Did have like a spherical shield that came over you, so you're protected from all sides. So just acknowledging that there is other stuff out there that could protect you. That's not just front facing like a traditional traditional shield. So armor. Let's see. Sorry. So, very, very typical. Again, I'm not going to deep dive into this because this is the way most armor systems work. So, I'm shortcutting this. I'm not going to go into all the different things, but just basically say, there's an extra bar for armor. For most weapons, if I shoot you and you have armor, it damages the armor first. When the armor goes to 0, then the weapon, then you start taking health damage. So fairly typical system there. And again, we may make this deeper. We may make it something that's more unique, later. But for now, it's important to understand that, you basically, at this point, assuming you have a shield at the same time. Right now you would have a health bar, armor bar, and shield bar, and a typical standard weapon would damage the shield, then damage the armor, then damage your health. And then other weapons could penetrate all the shields and armor potentially, and damage your health directly. Or it just depends on your IP again. So that's why I'm not going to care too much about that right now. So repair is another form of kind of health, and so I don't know if, I guess I'll call it for vehicles like the same, because there is health bars, but let's make it a different category just to, but I guess it also, I'll just call it, let's just put it here for now. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is that vehicle armor, can also be a whole other layer similar to a shield. So you may not be able to have both of these on together, like you don't use necessarily. I mean, there's nothing you would necessarily stop you. It's an add layer of complication, but you could have the vehicle armor be something that is, let's say, an extra layer, again, kind of like a shield. So you'd see another health bar pop up in your UI, for example, just taking a simple approach, not necessarily the most elegant approach, but just the simple one right now. So you'd see another bar pop up, and then again, most weapons would damage that down, then damage your armor down, and then do health damage to the player characters. So that's one of the tricks of vehicles. If we decide to do them again, if we have them or in a vehicle, right? So let's see. I'm going to take repair out of here. Well, let's keep it separate. I'm just thinking. So this could, but, so for example, I'm just going to put an example here. So, this is things like, can a gunner sword have its own health bar? So there could be, again, like sub damage and some things that are going on here that, could be important, to understand. So as I'm using a weapon, does it also kind of damage? Does it also have its own way of of not working, over time. And, and there's a bunch of things that could go along with this, but that's why I'm kind of going to use repair as a more generic thing to say, like, yes, armor and vehicles might be repaired. Again, you don't have to. Might be repairable, but, maybe there's other things that can repair stuff. So I don't know, if you're doing a game, especially a big open world game, GTA style game or whatever, if I've got my vehicle and I really like my vehicle, like I got to take it to a repair shop, right? And then spend some money and time. Like I'm not going to repair it in the middle of a fight, right? And so you have to kind of decide, how you're going to do that. There's a lot of layers of depth that could go into here, but I'm not going to try to get into all of that right now. So this is related to dying, but some games have it where so this particular system, the unconscious system, is quite often used in team-based games, and this is a reason for why your teammates have to work together. So this can be kind of a multiplayer thing, but it also can be done in other kinds of games where so you have a fixed amount of time to get revived, before you permanently die and have to respawn. So that's something, just again to think about. There's a lot of different mechanics for that, and so just something to kind of think about. There's a lot of ways to kind of skin that proverbial cat there. So. So respawning is something, that can happen. I'm drawing a blank on, so things can be permadeath, respawning, and, let's see, just real quick, jump in here what I'm thinking about. All right, so these two are kind of related because, what do you reload, right? And again, there could be other mechanisms depending on, what it is. I believe it was one of the latest Call of Duties had a system where if you died, you actually went to I think it was one of their multiplayer games. You actually go to like a prison or something like that, and you had to, if you had another fight down there, and if you win the fight, then you got you would respawn much faster than if you just die and then you had to wait longer, right? So So it's an interesting problem, but just saying there is some other solutions here, but it's not just a straightforward, yeah, Warzone, you go to the Gulag. Yeah. What did you think of that, Big Lob? What was your opinion on the Gulag? Was that a cool, innovative mechanic? Like it or hate it? What was your opinion on that one? So the other question is, and this is the same with single and multiplayer, but the problem gets harder in multiplayer, and we're not going to get into that, exactly now. But the respawning, what happens if you die? Quite often it's just it reloads the last save. But again, there's a bunch of different ways you can kind of skin this cat as far as the respawning. But you have to be a little careful about this, because in some games, for example, they've done some weird design decisions, and it's kind of it's tricky. And I would say that if you guys have at all looked at Crucible, and if you haven't, I definitely would recommend researching Amazon's Crucible game. And it lasted in the market a few weeks before it was yanked. I think they said they were going to redo it. Now I think they've decided not to. That was a really good, really veteran team, with a lot of people, that were very senior people working on it, and they made a lot of mistakes. One of them was the respawn system that really pissed off. Let's see. So real quick, so a lot of people were really pissed off by their respawn system, because when you respawned really far away at a save point, and you had to run really far to get back to a battle. And so suddenly you got like this couple minutes where you die, and then you have to like just run for a few minutes to get back to the game, and it slowed the pace of the game down a lot. And just that one design decision was tricky. So this is really a multiplayer thing, just come back to that. The how fast to respawn. This is really a multiplayer thing, but again, and also gonna put a thing in here of so the whole, a lot of these are multiplayer, but again, just kind of putting them in there for thinking about it, now. But the how fast to respawn, and then what I actually want to do is you'll see what I'm doing here for a second. Okay. Now, so the problem with Crucible was that they had so some games, like especially in multiplayer, when you die, you might have, say, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever it is, 20 seconds, where you're basically dead and you're waiting because they don't want you to like die and then just instantly respawn again, right? Because then there's not necessarily a penalty of it. And then Actually, I guess this would be maybe more of a save point, like in your base or something like that. So anyways, all of this is about how fast do I respawn, right? And how much, so what's the penalty for death, right? And I'll just make that happen. I'll make a note here is so, again, like, how far away from the current location, and how much I need to replay, whether it's single player or multiplayer. Again, if your save points are like 5 minutes away, every time I die in a really hard battle, then I gotta like go play another 5, 10, 20 minutes, to get back to where I am now. Like, I get pretty frustrated myself pretty quickly when games do that, where I'm just like constantly have to do it. But on the same hand, oh gosh, I don't remember the name of the title now. There was a game on the PS5 launch. I think it was a PS5 exclusive, and I'm totally drawing a blank on the name of it, but I know it got criticized because it's even in the single player mode, like you could respawn almost instantly and basically right back to the same fight. So you're fighting this creature, you die, and then you're like a meter away, and you're just fighting again, you die, and you're a meter away, you fight again, you die, and there was almost no cost. And so this penalty is important to understand. And games need challenge, and games do need that penalty, because if it just is like, well, a little like, oh no, bad, you died, like, okay, that's not a lot of challenge. But then if you get into like permadeath, here, like, that's pretty harsh, right? And so the balance for a lot of games is somewhere in the middle, but you got to find that, right? And that's something you have to figure out. We're doing. I was also going to mention, like, actually, let me put this here. May not shoot. So this is kind of related, but I'm going to put it up here just as a separate little point. Typical old school Mario, whatever, right? I earn a certain number of lives, and I can find new lives and get more lives. And that's basically every time I die, it uses a life, right? Pretty simple mechanic, but that's another system that could be potentially used here. But I was going to... So, do I lose any gear, equipment, those kind of things. So, again, what is the cost to death, right? And, what's going to happen there? Is it going to cost me time? Is it going to cost me, a resource? Is it going to cost me a life? Maybe we'll move lives down here, kind of as part of this system here. Do I... like in WoW or a game like that, like, you might, you might drop all your gear and it puts it in a tombstone or whatever, and then, I've seen a few games of this as well, like, your corpse is dead there, and people can actually loot some gear and some equipment from your corpse, even again. But there's some penalty there, right? There's something there that's kind of interesting. So, you can see that even that penalty for death has to be something you have to really think through and really balance, because it can be something that's can really affect the game, and how fun it is, and can get really frustrating really fast or not, right? And so that's something that can be really tricky to do. So I think this was most of it. All right, let me see. Alexis. The respawn really has to do with the game objective. In deathmatch, small respawn timers are okay, and more objective-oriented modes, respawn timers tend to be higher and offer better reward to killing. Yes, exactly. And so that's why I'm not going down the multiplayer path here and trying to min-max that right now. But yes, I mean, the way that you play your game and everything else, this affects the team dynamics a lot. And then I'll even just put a note in here. So this could be single player. So single player or multiplayer, right? And that do we have teammates? So I'm not going to go so again, some of this may be directly applicable. Some of this could be an AI NPC, that's there with you, and then kind of again what happens to them when they die, stuff like that. So again, I'm not trying to solve every problem here, but just trying to show you that there can be a variety of different solutions. So again, I've not covered everything in health systems. I mean, there's definitely games out there that have used other things and other stuff, but I wanted to show you, like, we just spent roughly an hour or a little bit more just bullet pointing. This wasn't even designing the systems, right? This was just kind of showing you what all these systems are just in the health system alone, right? And so again, didn't get into like super intensive into vehicles or teammates or other kinds of secondary stuff that could happen. Your IP could have all kinds of different, nuances to it. Technologies that, could exist if you're doing a sci-fi or fantasy game, and things like that. So, just trying to think here. So, for example, some games, like you think about Diablo or something like that, which I mentioned earlier, the health systems there, when you're doing like Diablo, you can heal to a certain point with your things, your items. And it's a good point here. So there are different amounts, different things. So, we'll just call it like, all right. And just to remind everybody that, again, the link to this document is at the very top of the chat channel here. The second or third link down, but anyways, there is a link to this. So again, if you're designing your own FPS down the road and you're wanting kind of a bullet pointed list, go back, use this document as a template, and you may say like, no, I don't have any of these things, right? If I'm doing a more casual game, you might just say like, look, we only do, heal over time, and that's all we're going to do. And there's no health packs, devices, skills, abilities. So by putting these things in here right now, I'm not saying that my game has all this stuff. What I'm doing is challenging myself and reminding myself about like what things are in there that I need to think about, right? And what's going to make that fun, what's going to make that interesting, and stuff. And so we need to be thinking about those kinds of things, So let's see here. So heal location, like you could have a little pad or a little thing that just, if it's sci-fi, that just, comes down and heals you if you get close to it, things like that. So just kind of trying to help you understand kind of what those are, doing. And then we'll just say, so again, with a lot of combat, you want to keep people really engaged in that one fight, right? And you want to keep them, going there. And then what becomes interesting, in these health systems is when you start getting hit with multiple types of weapons, they're doing multiple types of damage, and things like that. And so you've got to decide, what you want to do, and stuff. And so, like even just thinking about real quick, like, I think Alexios asked about this, but like, like this was kind of related to that. Like, can I damage myself? So like if I throw a grenade, and it lands by me and it goes off, and I'm in the damage radius, like, can that grenade hurt me? Right? Like, and then, this is a far off one, but this is kind of like the blood, the example from Diablo 3 of like the blood damage. So there's some games and some magic systems, some of the characters will actually can use their own health in order to power certain weapons and things like that. So again, that's just something you got to think about. Like, can I hurt myself? Can I hurt my thing? And this gets this system really quick too when you get into like MMOs and damage, and then and healing and stuff like that gets really complicated. Show here. So, for example, talking about like can I damage a friend or a teammate or things like that. In the MMORPGs, some of the edge cases that get really tricky, or even in multiplayer games, if you have multiple factions, if it's more than just say two factions, if you have like friendships and relationships and things like that, like a lot of MMORPGs, for example, they try to limit high level player from low level player from being able to a high level player, because you're in the same world, is not allowed to just run over and beat up a low level player, right? They don't want to have a bunch of what we call griefing going on with those types of games. And so, anyways, the challenge of that in the griefing is that if I have like a high level player and like that I'm going by, let's say I'm not even attacking him, and I'm a low level player, so he's level 50, I'm level 5, for example, right? Well, in the normal game, we would not be able to attack each other, or in some games, I can attack a higher level player, but the higher level players cannot attack a lower level player under maybe a certain range sometimes, or not at all. So it might be like if you're level 50, you could attack, a level 45 or level 45 and above, but maybe not level 50. They got all these convoluted rules, right? They're really complicated. And that's why MMOs can get really, really like exponentially harder to design. But I'm just using this as an example of an edge case that could come up again in a multiplayer game. But also, I could see being used in a single-player game, is a interesting mechanic. And that's why I think, you could apply this in kind of a similar way. But, so imagine if you have two factions, two people that don't like each other. Now imagine we have a third party, right? So this third party, this third person now, it's a three-way battle. It's two guys that are basically of the same level of themselves. And now I'm this low-level player that's over here. These guys can fight, so they're fighting, and they're trading things. And now one of these guys is my friend. So this guy's my friend. This guy's my enemy. This guy's my enemy. This guy's my friend, right? So I heal this guy who's my friend, right? So I did not attack this guy, but I healed this guy. So now, does that change my faction status with this guy because I healed his enemy while they're in combat? So I'm helping and assisting this guy. So even though I did not directly damage this guy, I still helped him, which changed my alliance in a lot of games. And that becomes really like crazy edge case, on a lot of stuff like that. And then there's other tricks that a lot of like MMO players figured out where, so let's just say it's one-on-one now. Now in a lot of MMORPGs, it's usually PvP and PvE. Now and this could work for both situations. So let's just say again it's a three-way battle, and I'm fighting I'm fighting another character who's my strength, my level. So we're allowed to fight. We're going at it. We're doing our thing, and I use a weapon that has an area of effect. So it damages over an area, not a point damage. So let's just say I throw a hand grenade, right? So I throw this hand grenade and it explodes and does damage. Well, what a lot of games do is if you're a low-level player and you attack a high-level player, that high-level player now is allowed to attack you. But he cannot initiate an attack, on somebody who didn't attack him first. So what they will do is while I'm busy here fighting with this guy, I'll start to throw a grenade, and this high-level player who's really smart will run in purposefully to here, and he knows that grenade is not going to damage him that much. It won't kill him. He then takes damage purposefully, in that battle, and now it flops. Now I'm now seen as the aggressor, so now he is now allowed to attack me and kill me, and in a lot of cases in MMOs, even steal my loot, steal my items and things like that. So that's where the edge cases can get real nasty, real fast, and I'm not going to get deep into that, but but you can see where like damage and healing and teams and all these kinds of mechanics could be really crazy. But again, there could be ways that you could figure out stuff to do that, and even in a single player game, right, to figure out how to make that interesting. And so I don't know, I'm just brainstorming like an example of like you could trick an NPC character or whatever into healing you, and that pisses off another faction, which now turns against him or something like that. Or so instead of them being a bunch of multiplayer MMOs things, it could be single player, but you're playing especially in like an open world game design or something like that, you could be playing these sides off of each other, both for healing and for stuff. Another trick that they used in a lot of MMOs was newbie players were still figuring out the controls. And so a lot of more advanced players would pretend to be your friend, and then they would be kind of helping you, tutorializing you through the game. And you have all your weapons like and attacks and stuff mapped to keys on your keyboard. And then that guy either is texting you or talking to you and telling you what to do while you're in a fight. He's pretending to like help you, and you're doing really well. And then he'll say like, no, like press H, and you're like, oh, okay, you press H. Well, H then throws the grenade, which then he runs into purposefully, allowing you to damage him, and now he turns on you and kills you and steals a bunch of your stuff. So I've seen that happen repeatedly, you know, in these kinds of games as well. So there's a lot of kind of edge cases around that kind of stuff. So you can see that, you know, even something that's perceived as simple as a health system can be something that is really, really complicated, right? There's the how do we have health in the first place? And what is this thing? Is it just a really simple bar? And that's all we have? Like, we don't have to have armor. We don't have to have shields. We don't have any of that. We could just have a simple, you know, weapons hit us and it does damage. And that's, you know, about as simple and trivial as it gets, right? But, you know, then, you know, and damage could just heal over time. You know, and that could be as simple as you want to have. And for a very basic game, you know, that could be all that's needed, right? But you can see that it can get really, really, really complicated, like, very quickly, and there's a lot of stuff you have to start figuring out in the health system and trying to understand the pluses and minuses, because this is really the core of the systems, you know, along with next week we can design the weapon systems and show how it works with the health systems maybe, and, you know, kind of start to see, like, how they kind of go back and forth. But, like, I wouldn't necessarily design the health system a lot deeper than this until I designed the weapon system. So while I could go design this whole system and try to figure out what this is, right now I don't know all the answers. I don't know exactly what needs to be designed here. I don't know, you know, what the IP is. I don't know. Is this modern day? Is it futuristic? Is it fantasy? So I don't know, you know, what's going to happen, right? And I don't know if I need to use mana to heal, you know, because I've got my healer. Again, think about WoW and, you know, games like that where you got to bring a healer with you. And there's a whole, you know, guy that's dedicated just to support, you know, and his job is just to make sure I don't die, right? And that's literally, like, he may or may not even attack people in the game, right? He's just there to heal me, and that's his job and role. And I might have a health pack or something on me. I might be able to heal myself, but the amount of time and the trade-off is also important. Actually, that's a good thing I didn't put in here. So So, for example, how long does it take to heal? You know, is really critical again, because where this comes into is, you know, and also I want to say is, like, oops. So how long does it take me to do the healing action? So, for example, you know, is it hotkeyed, you know, on my keyboard? And, you know, can I just, you know, hit a, you know, and maybe that's predefined. Maybe it's, you know, I've got my belt on in Diablo or whatever, and I can put things there, so I can just quickly hit, you know, F1, F2, F3 and access my belt, and, you know, and I can quickly heal myself, or, you know, or do things. And actually, I'll put in here too, because it really is part of the same system. And then one more thing I'm going to put in here is all right, let me explain this now. So I'm fleshing that out just a little bit more in our last few minutes here. So I'm detailing this out a little more just because we've got about 5 more minutes, and I don't want to switch over to the next topic here. So, by the way, if anybody has any questions, comments, anything, please speak now. We just got a few minutes left. Happy to answer them. So if anybody's still awake, feel free to let me know what you're thinking about. Or hopefully this has been helpful for everybody that's watching it live or watching this later. Again, not trying to be exhaustive here, but I want to really try to show you, the complexities of these health systems, healing, mana. All these things are kind of in that same thing of things that, make you better or make it so you can't, function well, and really affect the user experience, in a big way. So what I was just doing is so this whole, how long does it take? So if I'm shooting, for example, one of the trade-offs that a player who's the aggressor has to be thinking about is okay, I'm bam, 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 bam. I'm taking damage as well. So as I'm shooting, I see my health bar. I'm going boom, boom, boom. I'm getting hit. I'm watching my health bar go down, right? So at some point, I have to make a strategic choice about, do I retreat and go heal myself, or do I push forward? Because if I see the enemy's health bar and stuff like that, and that's actually a good point too, real quick, of just can I see how damaged that character is, that kind of thing, right? Back to the information things. It can clutter the screen, but also is useful information. But the reason that the healing and how long it takes is important is I am sitting there fighting, and then I'm like, crap, well, I'm down to 5%. He's down to 5%, but I know this next shot, if I land it through, and I get a good shot in, it's going to kill him. But I'm like, but also if he shoots me one more time, it might kill me, right? And so I have to decide, what's the risk reward, right? And so if I stop to, let's just call it a health pack for now, right? If I have to stop and do a health pack to heal, is that health pack really quick to access, or is it in my inventory somewhere and I got to go find it? And even if it takes me 2, 3, 4 seconds, at that time period, I could die, right? And so that may be too long to access. So if it's not a button on the screen or not a keyboard shortcut, it's probably too long to access, there. But so there's the access of that thing, i.e. the I'm going to instigate the heal, but then there's also the while I'm healing. So most of the time there's also the I'm gonna let's just say drink the potion, right? So now I'm goop, 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 goop. Now that again could just be a couple seconds, but I'm basically vulnerable for those couple seconds while I'm healing. So that also makes me vulnerable. And then in some games the health is not instantly applied. I go doop, 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 and then I wait for 1, 2, 3, and then you see the health bar increase, right? So that's what this kind of thing again. So sometimes you take your potion, then it's going to kind of slowly over time. And so all those considerations, how long it basically takes me from engaging in a combat position to re-engaging back into my combat position, all that stuff could take, a few seconds, could take, hopefully not a minute, but, it's going to take some time. And during that time, 2 things have happened. One, I distracted myself. And I've lost focus, right? So I've lost focus from being in combat. And in the same hand, I've now caused this delay. Now, the enemy basically is probably going to get a free shot on me, and things like that, as well. And so, So there's a bunch of factors there that you have to think about. Like what's the advantage that the enemy is going to have if I heal right now, right? And that's the dynamic and the tension that you're trying to build. You're trying to build that tension of like, guys, like you probably don't want to heal right now, and it's not in this list, but reloading is the same problem, and things like that, right? So use of any objects, switching weapons, all these things have a bit of time, even though they happen relatively fast. It's still one of those things, like even if I switch weapons, like I may have to switch, hit the button, do the switch, and then it's like it puts the weapon away, pulls out the next weapon, reloads it, and then I'm firing again. It's not instantaneous, right? And so all these factors will really tactically make it hard for me to decide, like, should I do this right now or not? So something to consider there. Yeah, so Alexios, you could have gadgets, goggles, Yes, I mean, it just depends on that. To me, that's a UI gimmick, and that's not a bad idea. And games have done that. There could be scanning, there could be all sorts of stuff. It's really up to you as a game designer to figure out like what's right for your game. How much information do you really want to know? What's important to know? How immersive do you want the game to be? All those factors all factor into this health system and healing, death and dying, all these kind of things. You can see it's all kind of really interrelated, right? And next week we'll get into weapon systems, and kind of show how those directly affect the health, healing, and these other systems here, energy systems and things like that. And then it gets even deeper. Like we get into inventory management and like how many slots do I have? And like do I have enough slots to put health packs in, or do I want to carry more ammo, or do I want to have more weapons? And so it gets even deeper and deeper and deeper when I start to kind of figure out this resource, and how they are, like, can health packs stack? All these things, like, right? Like, all those are factors that would go into like my inventory management and part of my UI. And again, like now I have to make hard tactical choices about what makes the game fun. So, and what I'm going to carry and the tactics I'm going to use and deploy during the game. And that this is, and it gets much harder when you're on a controller and things like that. So we'll get into that in the later week, but hopefully this is helpful for you guys, and hopefully we will see you next week. So have a great week, everybody. Take care now.